Let's summarize week 8, follow the money. Here's what we learned this week. Once a film or television project is financed and produced, then distribution takes place. This is the point when we are generating distribution revenues and when we are able to pay off our loans and investors and any other party that is involved in a financial or distribution way in our project. So this week's module defines an ideal profit structure and what that would entail. We understand the risks and we know how to mitigate them. We understand how to establish an impactful business plan to attract and secure investors. We can now define and manage revenue structures in view of profitability. We can structure a business plan and we understand the various roles a producer can take in film and television and the various roles an investor can take. We're now able to understand how profits are generated and how those impact each party that is involved in our project. We know how to identify risks that impact the profit and we know how to mitigate them if needs be. And we know how to establish a project business plan for investors. If you haven't done so, here are a few items for you to do this week and to complete this week. Read the module sections, profitability profiles, optimizing profit structures, slate financing, karma, the revenue police, producers and their roles, the business plan, project pitch deck examples for film and television, due diligence, proof of funds. Look at the case study Kill Me Now and watch the case study video. Watch this very summary video, of course. Watch the guest speaker videos, read chapter 9 in the textbook Entertainment Finance Today, and take a look at the video playlist for Module 8. So by the end of this week, I'd like you to submit quiz 7, due by Sunday night, post your discussion board posts for Kill Me Now 3, also by Sunday night, and meet with your extra credit study group if you're doing a business plan for this course. What are profitability profiles? When a producer decides to produce a film or a television show, and short of that idea being financed by Netflix or another streamer or maybe a network or a studio who love the idea and just pick it up, most producers have to deal with investors and banks and lenders and sales agents and so forth to be a part of their project when they realize the project. Now, these parties each have a reason as to why they want to be involved. And that reason relates to the risk that they're taking and their money they can make with your project. So a bank would insist on recouping in the first position, meaning the first recoupment corridor, which they will hold exclusively. They make money by charging interest fees and loan fees. They take a fairly low risk because they recoup in first position, and their deals are often short-term, meaning not longer than 2 years. A junior lender would look at the collateral that is left by the senior bank and would recoup in second position, and they make money by charging higher interest rates than what a senior lender would charge, and they often also charge premiums and executive producer fees and some legal fee reimbursements and so forth. They carry a medium risk, and the term for their loan is medium, meaning up to 5 years. The incentive lender would look at the incentive region that they are supposed to cash flow a deal for and make sure that this region is solid, that it doesn't change the legislation, that it's not going to run out of money, and all those things. The incentive lender then charges their fees in relation to the amount that they're cash flowing, and sometimes they charge executive producer fees and legal fees as well. That's how they make money. They must make sure that the local expenditure is met, so whatever the budget line items are that were eligible, the incentive lender wants to make sure that the film or TV show is exactly produced in accordance with those bonded budget line items. They like the fast repayment that the incentive region often offers, and they feel and often do have a fairly low risk. Sales agents have no risk because all they do is take on a project and will charge a sales fee and distribution expenses. They do like longer terms because they want to make sure they can keep the film for a longer period of time and sell it longer. And they really are looking for mainly commercial projects which they have an easier time selling. Sometimes when sales agents do offer a minimum guarantee, which would be paid in advance, they would likely charge higher sales fees. Now for the producer, when they do project, they obviously look at the producer fees that they can charge in the budget as well as the overhead, and they look at the profits that they can earn as well as the library value a film or TV show would hold. Music investors look at projects and make sure that they can be sold around the world. It is of interest to them that a lot of original scoring in music is applicable for the content, and they would recoup from music royalties that are generated through the international distribution and domestic distribution of the content. So they are fairly low risk because they're recouping in a separate corridor from music royalty rights alone. Now, post-production and visual effect companies sometimes do defer a portion of their fee because they want to secure a project very early. So they want to secure deal flow. They would also like to expand the clientele relationship that they have because they know a producer who's happy with them today might come back tomorrow. Equity investors look at a film or TV show and will see where do I sit in the recoupment corridor, and can there be something done to optimize my recoupment corridor, and how much ownership can I hold in a project. So for them, it's really about the upside. What is happening in domestic? Can a project maybe generate some box office? So we need to look at them as the investor that takes the highest risk, and we need to optimize their recoupment position, maybe by allowing some of the second tier territories to be excluded from the senior lenders collateral pool, so we can assign those to the equity investor and they would make money in first position from those separated territories. And of course, the investor makes money through their premium and profit participation. How to optimize our profit structures? There are a few ways where we can optimize our profit structures. Obviously, we already learned about reducing our budget, reducing expenses for production and distribution. We also learned about the inclusion of non-recoupable finance sources that we do not have to repay as part of our finance plan. Now, there are some other things we should consider. We should avoid first dollar deals, which means a participation from either the actor or the director directly from box office, meaning at the same level that an exhibitor would recoup. This would mean that if we sell our movie to a studio, for example, the studio would have to assume this responsibility, and many studios don't like that. So we would run the risk of not being able to sell our film to a studio that could then do theatrical distribution. In fact, we would run the risk to sell it to any US distributor who would do theatrical distribution for us. So first dollar gross deals should ideally be avoided. Now, box office bonuses we can do, but we need to make sure that box office bonuses are in agreement with our equity investor deal, because here's what's happening. If we achieve a certain box office bonus, we would have to put that payment in the waterfall, and it would usually happen before the equity investor makes any money. So in that case, it would mean that whenever we pay a box office bonus that's driven by a certain box office ticket sales to apply, we have to pay the actor or director after the junior loan was paid and the senior loan was paid and before the equity is paid, unless we get the actor or director to agree to be paid after the equity is paid and their premium is paid. That would be the ideal solution for box office bonuses. I've seen them sit in both positions, before the equity and behind the equity. Another way to optimize profits for the equity investor is to use the equity investor maybe as a lender. Not have a senior loan, but allow the equity investor to be the senior loan. So for them, when they take over the senior loan position and pay that extra 20% that you're now missing because you're not having a gap loan, they would make more money because they can charge a higher premium, or if they do a loan for 2 or 3 years, they can charge a fairly high interest, which becomes profit for them. There is a way for them to also make more money when you do ring fencer territories, meaning you are allocating a certain set of territories by taking them out of the collateral of the senior lender and allocate the revenues that is connected to those ring fencer territories, as I call them, which are often tier 2 territories the bank is not keen on holding or will let us release, and then the equity investor can get paid for those sales when they come in. The beautiful thing with those ring fencer, I would say tier 2 territory countries, is that they usually sell first. So it's interesting, and sometimes the equity investor even makes money before the bank because of this situation, that these smaller territories are sold fast and they're very eager to pay. The slate financing is another way of diversifying the investor's risk by having them invest not just in one movie or one TV show, but maybe 3 movies or maybe 2 movies and a television show. Whatever it is, the slate could be mixed in regards to genres, in regards to content, meaning film and television, maybe fiction and non-fiction, and in regards to budget ranges. This will diversify the investor's risk because they're participating in more than one project, and these projects are very different. Let's take a closer look into slate financing. As I've mentioned earlier, slate financing helps investors to diversify because we're going to put in, for example, film content, television content, scripted content, non-scripted content, different genres, different budgets. That helps, that kind of diversification helps investors to not just focus in one set of content, but really spreading it out. This will also help with distribution because non-fiction content, fictional content, film and television content now goes to different buyers, different distributors, which again replaces the limitation for one project to just being able to be bought by one set of buyers. The investor's risk is diversified because if one project does not do well, another project can exceed certain expectations potentially. Also, the fact that we are producing more than one piece of content helps us to secure a deal flow with certain buyers and therefore secure revenues. We find as producers a higher acceptance in the marketplace because buyers know us as volume providers. This will obviously also help decrease our production costs because the more we produce, the better our deals can be. And sometimes if we do certain deals with certain crew members over and over and over, they will do deals fast and they will reduce their salaries in many occasions. It can also help with distribution deals because if we do more than one piece of content with the sales agent, they may be happy to reduce their fees a little for us. There are deals to be made with the unions and the guilds because if you do, let's say, a 3-picture low-budget deal with Ayatse, those low rates would apply for all the content that would be in that low-budget area that you have negotiated with. So our deals with unions can help reduce crew costs. And we do have a significance as a so-called player in the industry because we become a content, I would say a content volume provider is the word I was looking for. Now here are some cons. When we work on these projects, they're not all developed at the same time, meaning some might not be ready to be shot. So this could be due to certain reasons. For example, the script is not really optimally developed and is not ready. The cast director or the showrunner has other responsibilities that they have to take care of and might not be available for us, which pushes our schedule around. The cast might have to be replaced if we need to shoot at a certain time. We could have delays that would then create changes in our sales estimates if a film is not shot in a certain period of time with a certain actor. Maybe 2 years later that actor has a lesser value. We can also deal with legislation changes in the tax incentive region where we were trying to shoot. Maybe they changed the eligibility, maybe they ran out of money. Bond company delays sometimes cause issues because we might need bridge lending, which is very expensive if we don't get our project in line with the bond company early on. With that, we could also have bank closing delays if elements are shifting, which again would cause delays on all the levels, not just the production, but also the distribution level. If we do sometimes work with investors who are excited to come in and say we're going to be part of the slate, and then decide we change our minds and we don't want to be part of the slate. So now we have the potential that the investor is either not investing at all, so we're losing the equity, or they are simply no longer available. When we have delays with our slate, investors are of course concerned simply because their money is sitting around not being used, and sometimes they then decide to pull it. If we have issues with the location that we're shooting in, it could be a force majeure, could be something is going on there, weather issues or legislation issues. And of course, we could have delays with our cast that could be health related. So all these things, when anything on our project is delayed and it is a slated piece of content, it affects the other pieces in the slate as well. And these delays can turn into lower returns of investments for the investor, because they now have to wait longer for their money to be recouped, because delays then also cause, production delays then also cause distribution delays, which then cause delays in receiving the revenues and profit participation for the investor. CAMA stands for Collection Agent Management Agreement. A CAMA is an overall agreement that includes all the parties that are connected to a film or television project. These would be all the finance parties and all the distribution parties that would be part of the film or TV project, but also all the profit participants and deferment providers. Anyone who is connected to the film or television project that receives either a payment, a deferment, a salary, a fee, a service fee, a commission, or simply is a lender or an investor would be connected to the CAMA. And of course, the guilds are party to the CAMA and have to sign it and are a signatory, and also the producers are a signatory to the CAMA. So everyone connected in regards to financing and distribution and in connection to any payments whatsoever would be a signatory to the CAMA, the Collection Agent Management Agreement. And what needs to be understood is that this CAMA doesn't just list whoever is part of the project. It also lists what they're getting paid and when they're getting paid, in which position they are sitting. So this CAMA says exactly, here's who you are, here's what investment you gave us, for example, and here's where your investment and your premium will be returned after these and these and these and these payments have been made to these and these and these parties. So the Collection Agent Management Agreement defines very clearly the ranking system that applies when distribution revenues come in and how they are being paid to the various parties and in what ranking system they are being paid. Let's talk about the revenue police. When I refer to the revenue police, I'm actually referring to the collection agent. The collection agent sets up an escrow-like bank account that distributors use when they make their payments in regards to the distribution agreements that they signed. They also use this account to pay for overages if they are applicable. So the collection agent makes sure that all the revenues are recorded and then uses these revenues to pay fees and expenses to the parties like the sales agent and of course the collection agent and anyone who is contractually agreed to receive fees. But the collection agent also makes sure that all the loans and investments are paid, including their costs, fees, and premium. The collection agent sends out revenue and expense reports to all the parties in the collection agent management agreement, which is something that is really great because it offers a true transparency of what monies are coming in from the movies and their distribution revenues and from the television contents, and how that money is paid at any given time to any given party. So they give you a clear picture, like a mirror, of where you stand with your project at any given time, who you've paid, who still needs to get paid, and where you are in the recoupment schedule. The reports are usually offered and issued quarterly, and that means you don't have to hire a CPA or a production accountant to do that work. It's all done by the collection agent. This collection reporting offers full transparency to producers, senior lenders, junior lenders, equity investors, sales agents and distributors, guilds and unions, talent, and any other profit participant or deferment participant at any given time. When we look at movies, we always see a long list of producers. Now, what do they actually do? Let's talk about some of the producers and what their roles are in regards to film projects and TV projects, for example, because it's a little different for film and television. So for film, the producer is the person that controls the IP, that controls everything. It's basically the person in charge. It is the most important credit for a film to have. It's comparable to what the executive producer would be for television. So for the film producer, it would mean in television that they are working for the executive producer, who would be the most important credit for the TV show. So it kind of reverses, right? So the film producer is the most important credit for film. The executive producer is the most important credit for television. The producer for television works with the executive producer and toward the executive producer. The executive producer in film is often someone who is an investor. It could also be a distributor, but it's often someone related to financing for film. And for television, the executive producer is really oftentimes the creator, the most important person on a TV show. The co-executive producer could be someone who is an investor for film, and it could also be someone who connects someone to, or connects a producer to an investor for a film project. In television, the co-executive producer could be a co-creator who works with the executive producer. The supervising producer is often someone who manages the physical production aspect of a film or a television show. The line producer also manages the physical production, but also is responsible for the budget, for creating it and for adhering to it. The associate producer for film and television is someone who they can have a lot of roles. They can help provide funding, they can help provide advantageous deals, they can help provide cast. They're like a helping hand in any which area that is possible and helps support and push a project, meaning a film or television project, forward. The creative producer is often responsible to deal with the script development and the packaging aspect of a film or television show. Let's take a look at the business plan, our project pitch deck. When a producer decides to produce a film or television project, the first thing they would have to do is to put together a business plan / pitch deck for the content that they want to create in order to attract investors. Now, obviously, as I mentioned before, the pitch deck is very different depending on where it's going to and who is getting it. If you create a pitch deck for a creative executive or an acquisition executive, it doesn't need to have the financials that, for example, would be included in a pitch deck that goes to an investor. So I'd like to focus on, for this class, since it's a finance class, on pitch decks that go to investors. And this is how I structure my pitch decks. Again, a lot of people do different things, so it's all good. There's no rules that are set in stone, but I'd like to walk you through the considerations and elements I include into creating my business plan pitch deck. So first, we need to be clear about what needs to be in there in view and the expectance that someone is going to check off facts. So there is going to be a due diligence that's going to happen. So we need to do a producer / investor checklist that allows the producer to check on the investor and vice versa. So for the producer, it is important to understand if the investor has the funding to make this kind of commitment to the film or TV content. And for the investor, it is important to understand what the producer states in the business plan and if this can actually be achieved. We need to also work with disclosures that protect us as producers, and these are legal disclosures that have to do with the fact that we want to obviously legally disclose that we're not representing or guaranteeing and warranting any of the projections that we put into our business plan to come to fruition, because we don't know that as producers. Projections are projections and they're not guarantees. And most investors understand that. So we need to disclose that an equity investor, for example, can lose the entire investment. We also need to disclose that we don't want the equity investor, or anyone for that matter, to take our content, to take our business plan and content information and shop it around without us knowing where it's going. So it needs to be disclosed as a confidential business plan that is only allowed to go to people that we approve to see it. So we need to put in our track record information, of course. So this is track record for us, track record for similar projects, and track record for a team. We're going to talk about some market considerations and audience components. Who's our target audience and what markets are we going to attempt to release this film or TV content into? Is it going to be a theatrical release? Is it a TV content that's going to a streamer, or is it maybe something that goes to a network? So who are the intended buyers for the content that we're trying to put together? Our project valuation has to do with our sales estimates and the value that a bankable sales agent will put on our piece of content. And we also have to think about how we align interests with the investor. We have to have some skin in the game by having paid for certain development costs. We also want to make sure the investor understands that we don't make any profits until and unless the investor has recouped their investment and their premium. And we also want to, of course, make sure that we're doing a fair deal with the investor and that we are not taken advantage of by investors who ask for a large IP and profit participation ownership. So we want to make sure that there is a fair deal in place that considers industry standards and default provisions. While an equity investor cannot default on us with the equity portion, there can be default provisions set if the equity investor is, for example, taking over the senior lending position, in which case they do have the option to put in a default position the same way a bank would. But other than that, we can talk about default positions like late payments. If we, for example, say to an investor, we're going to make your money back in 5 years, and then nothing's happening, we could maybe add late fees to the premium, as an example. And here's what a business plan pitch deck should include. It should include the project information, which means a log line, a summary, and the character description. As mentioned before, the audience, the target audience, the marketplace we're going into, and the distribution strategy should be mentioned. We want to do a little bit of an industry overview as it is relevant today. Where are we today? What's happening in the marketplace? We want to support and underline the unique selling point of our project. Why is it different? Why is it relevant today? We want to mention some comparables and some competition. The competition, I always have to say, I hardly ever do that. But sometimes when people, for example, use examples that don't work, that's what I consider a competition, where they say, this is what we're not doing, and here is why we're not doing it. It's not an absolute must. I want to mention it here in case it's something you want to do. More important than that is really the comparable projects. And here again, we're not going to, while we mention the budget and the box office, we're not going to use the box office for a revenue calculation, but we do want to show a relationship between the budget and the potential box office when we use comparable projects. Risk mitigation is obviously important, so we mentioned the risks, the production risk, the finance risk, and the completion risk. So production is actually completion risk. Finance risk is anything related to revenues and profits. We are talking about how we mitigate them in particular. The production risk we're obviously mitigating by using a completion bond who ensures the on-time and on-budget production of a film or TV project, and we are ensuring our distribution revenues not only by using a collection agent who makes sure that everything comes into one pot that they control neutrally, but also we're going to add performance clauses with our sales agency agreement to keep them on track. We talk a little bit about what our team entails and who in the team has the track record. We might be lacking. So if a producer is a first-time producer, they want to surround themselves with people that support whatever wisdom and knowledge they are lacking. And then we're obviously going to show financials, which have to do with our sales estimates and our funding and recoupment plan. And the one thing I think you always want to do and make sure of is that you use a visual deck that shows that supports the genre, the mood, and the setting of your project. You are operating in a visual media. This is not a business plan for as I always say before, a washer dryer selling company. This is a film project or a television project you're putting together. So the visuals should be very appealing and supporting of the medium that you're working in. There are some do's and don'ts I want to mention as it relates to business plan. The do's mainly concern themselves with what are you to do with the business plan, what goes in it. As we mentioned earlier, the project information should be there, the audience, marketplace, and distribution components should be there, an industry overview and the unique selling points should be mentioned. You want some comparables in there, you want to identify the risk and offer mitigation strategies, you want to talk about your team and their track record. You want to put some groundwork down on how you arrive at the financials and what you're asking the investor to fund. And you want to talk about the ROI. You want to make it a very appealing visual presentation. And you do want to know your project inside and out. Because when you pitch it, you want to have fun pitching it and you want to be enthusiastic about your project. Here are some don'ts. You do not want to read the text that is on your deck because the executives and investors can see what's on the deck. They don't need you to read it to them. Instead, comment on the items you want the recipient to retain. And remember, provide a color commentary, as I say. Do mention important points and comment on what is seen on the slide. Keep your presentation under 10 minutes. Be short but precise. Be prepared to answer questions when executives or investors interrupt you during your pitch. This might happen. You might start pitching the project and someone asks a question right in between and it might throw you off. Just be prepared that this might happen. So test your pitch with friends and colleagues and encourage them to pick it apart and ask questions so you get used to the process of being interrupted and jumping right back in to complete your pitch. Prepare non-defensive answers to potential questions you might be asked. Some executives answer silly questions, they ask silly questions and you want to be sometimes giving them strong feedback or give back or punchline. You don't want to do that. You want to have something non-defensive prepared for some of the questions that you can respond to. Give them an idea of what is offered to make a difference. So talk about them not only understanding how and why your idea is relevant today, but give them also a place and a space to offer ideas to you, and then include them. Be open to including some of them, even if you just say something like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I might add that, or I might use that. Just show your openness to the executive's feedback. This is more so for pitching with an industry executive who would potentially acquire your content. As it relates to investors, I would be a little careful in taking the ideas. If they have a good idea and you feel it's something that's solid and usable, absolutely take it and make them feel good about taking it. But the content should really be something that is up to you, especially when you deal with investors. Now, they can comment on optimizing the financial structure, and you can go and say, okay, let me think about that. Let me think about your idea of how you want to invest and how you want to recoup. Important also is that you read the room. This goes for entertainment executives, meaning acquisition executives, as well as financiers. You can see in their face if you lose them or if they're still there. You got to watch facial reactions to your content and recognize when you lose them and shift gear and make it more fun and get more precise, and don't expand too much. Go back to a narrow pitching style and stick to facts rather than giving too much color commentary. Because if they're too bored, they're likely going to pass. Let's talk about some important due diligence items that come up after you have an investor who is interested now to actually finance your project. There is a long list of things. I actually split the list up in two, and I wanted to put as much on here as possible so you are clear about what you can face with any investor who is interested in funding your project based on a pitch that was successful. We talked about the fact that you want to fully disclose all the risks that a project would entail. You want to also disclose some mitigation strategies you would like to apply. You want to talk about the alignment of interest between you and the investor, and you are, of course, mentioning the legal disclaimer that protects you from them thinking you're making any promises that are guaranteed. You also want to make sure that there are no legal claims against your content. Could there be a potential chain of title claim? You need to make sure that that's not the case, but you also want to make sure that you're not dealing with an investor who has a legal claim against them, or is maybe even convicted for fraud or another felony. The investor should confirm that the sales estimates are established by a bankable sales agent. So as an investor, you really need to know where these numbers are coming from and who established them. The investor should also confirm that the sales agent that is selling the project is actually selling the project, and that that person is the right one to sell the project. So they should do their own due diligence on all these distribution elements. The pre-sales are obviously an important part of the finance plan, so the investor should also obtain information from the sales agent directly if they feel the pre-sales that are intended are actually realistic. And the investor should confirm as well that the sales agent is willing to enter into a sales agreement with the performance clause. Now, if the sales agreement is already there when you have your project finished or your pitch deck finished, obviously that doesn't have to be there, but in case you're still working on it, this is something the investor would confirm. The investor should confirm that the intended audience and marketplace is in line with the specification of the project, and they usually ask other people. They go take your pitch deck and talk to other people about it, who give them feedback about the target audience that you chose and the marketplace that you're trying to get into. The investor should confirm, and so should the producer, that the project is actually bondable with the director and the cast that is being attached. It might help for the producer and the investor to confirm that there is a casting director that's attached, if that is the chosen way of attaching cast, and that this casting director has established relationship with the targeted cast. If there are talent engagement letters already in place, the investor should confirm that they are in place and should take a look at them and approve them. The investor should also confirm that the producer does have, in fact, established relationships with someone who would give them a gap loan or a pre-sale loan, like a senior lender. And here we continue with our due diligence checklist part 2. The investor should also confirm that the producer has established relationships with whoever is cash flowing the incentive and with all the parties, in fact, listed in the financial plan. Whoever is in there, whoever the producer is listing to be part of the movie or the TV show as a financier, the investor should confirm that these relationships do exist. The investor should confirm that the team listed in the project is actually attached to be a part of the project, or at least there is a real path of attaching them. And the investor should then also, if they are attached, check on the track record to make sure it actually is correct. The confirmation that the completion bond company is aware of the project and open to bonding it is important for investor and the producer alike. The producer should confirm the terms with the investor and the role that the investor wants to take. Is the investor envisioning to take an active role or a passive role? What kind of terms do they like? And let's put those in writing and confirm them with each other. The producer should confirm the availability of funds with the investor, meaning obtain a proof of funds. The investor and producer should conclude a fair deal that follows industry standard terms and conditions. They should also agree to put in an arbitration clause in the investment agreement that could be an IFTA arbitration clause, which is specialized for arbitration in the industry. The investor and producer could agree on milestones, what to happen at what time, and how do we deal with things if they don't happen. The investor should agree that production expenses are spent in accordance with the budgeted and bonded budget, and that any overages are subject to a claim with the bond company. So the producer is not going to be responsible for them, nor is the investor. The investor should conclude and agree that the project delivery elements and master elements are held in a film lab to be safe, and that access letters to access those elements are provided to the producer and the investor if the investor wants them. The investor cannot be allowed to just take them out of there without the producer knowledge, of course, so the lab access letter to the investor needs to be limited to be approved by the producer. If the investor provides a senior loan, he should be able to file a security lien against the film or TV show, which would help the investor to benefit from any kind of default by basically taking over all the rights and revenues connected to a film or TV show. What kind of proof of funds could we ask for from an investor? I think I've mentioned before that I've actually worked with investors who came up to me maybe at the Cannes Film Festival, where we are normally present with our yacht, and they come on the yacht and they have a cappuccino with us or a glass of Prosecco, and they're very excited to invest in one or the other film that we're producing or in our slate. And then months later, negotiating back and forth with them, I find out they never intended to do anything, nor do they have the money to do anything. And this unfortunately happens a lot. And sometimes I'm hoping that my bullshit radar, as I call it, will detect someone like that early on. But sometimes I'm wrong. And sometimes, you know, I have to find out when I ask for proof of funds that either proof of fund doesn't come, or it comes and it's not the investor's proof of funds. And these are things I have experienced, which is why I share them with you. A proof of funds is needed for the producer, so the producer can verify that the interested investor actually has the wherewithal to invest in the film or TV show with the amount that is talked about. A proof of fund could be a recent bank statement, a letter from a CPA, or an investment portfolio, as long as any of and all of these documents have the name of the investor on them, or maybe a company that the investor owns. So it is important to check who's actually on the proof of funds. And also, if it's a letter from a CPA, check out the CPA. You know, is he maybe a cousin from the investor? How do we know? So there are a few things we as producers need to look into. It is good if the investor allows us to call the CPA and also contact their banker if they give us a bank statement, for example. We would obviously sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, so that we would not share any of the proof of funds documentation with any third party, because this is private information we should not be sharing with anyone. So to sum it up, the proof of funds can be a bank statement from the investor, an investment portfolio or an overview, a statement from a CPA, or any other statement that shows us that the investor has funds available to allocate to our production. So thank you for going through the materials in week 8. And again, if you have any questions about anything you read or saw in this module 8, please feel free to reach out to me through Canvas or set up a one-on-one appointment so we can go over these materials together.